It happens. That's why I know to listen for it.
Welcome off season after fans. Glad to have you here for episode 54. And we have Darrion here to talk TCU football from Locked on Horned Frogs, which will be our first of two Big 12 episodes we have this week. We'll have the Oklahoma State Cowboys coming later. But big offseason for the Horned Frogs, a team who recently was in a national title game and last year won 9 games. Been a lot of success there under Sonny Dykes and definitely a QB transfer that I'm excited to talk about. So one thing I ask all of our viewers, Darrion, first of all, what got you into the space? How long have you been a TCU guy, and where can our viewers listen to you and find you?
Yeah, so I've been all around. I've been by myself. I've been with the network, and I've done 2 shows with the network. Originally, I was on Locked on HBCU. I did that for 4 years, and then I've spent the last year with TCU. Prior to that, I was just doing things in college as far as independent YouTube channels, radio shows, podcasts with the school newspaper, all of those type of things that really sharpened the blade for me, and then moved on to a different lane and got more into the podcast space consistently for the last 5 years. Now you can find me on Locked on Horned Frogs on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. But it's been a lot of fun on this 5-year ride. So I get to meet people like you, get to do these type of shows. So I get to enjoy it.
Awesome. No, I'm glad to have you here. It's always good to hear people's stories. And especially I always like listening to people who were doing other media and then got into the Locked On world, since I have a relationship with several of those guys. So that's good to know. But talking about the Horned Frogs, and it's been a lot of success in recent years. Sonny Dykes came over from SMU, and you guys may have had a national title appearance year 1, then regressed a little bit in 2023, his second year, and then have had back-to-back 9-win seasons. So not many teams have won more games than you guys over the past couple of years. What do you attribute that consistency to under Dykes?
Man, that's such an interesting question, because from the outside looking in, everything's great, right? But then when you inside looking out, everybody's arguing for more than 9 wins.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people who aren't connected to TCU, it sometimes makes me feel like, you know what, let's be grateful for what we have, because there's a lot of programs who would love 9 wins. And it's interesting that you asked that question. I think Dykes is a solid coach, right?
Yeah.
I think that he is. I think he's building a program. I think he's a solid leader. I've had my criticisms and everything about him. But at the end of the day, one thing I believe strongly is that everyone in that locker room, everyone connected to TCU buys in. And if there's anything that he does better than anything on his resume, it's creating buy-in. So we'll see what happens this year. They have a lot of newness, from a new offensive system to a new quarterback to new starting corners to new starting edge rushers. It's new all across the board. New wide receiver ones. Everything's new. So I'll be very fascinated to watch the buy-in process for TCU in 2026 because of all the change that we saw in the offseason.
Awesome. No, that's a good point. And I think a lot of our viewers probably will connect some of the dots here, because I'm a South Carolina alum. So Kendall Briles moving to the Gamecocks from, I did my grad school there. So have talked a lot about Kendall Briles and going over, and hopefully he can do some work with Lenore Sellers. But your new offensive system, Gordon Samus comes over from UConn. He was the O coordinator there and was the interim head coach at the end of the year. What is your new offense going to look like? And maybe that can be kind of rolled into one of the QB I'd mentioned I want to talk about. Jaden Craig, transfer from Harvard, something we don't hear about a ton, but a guy who, for a while, the NFL guys thought he might just go in the draft last year. 6'3", 230, pro-level arm. Like he looks the part of a guy at the next level.
Yeah. When it comes to Samus and his offense specifically, I think you're going to see a much more balanced offense. You're going to see an offense that's more physical And, everyone watching this hasn't watched TCU, right? So I'll give that part for those who are familiar with what the Horned Frogs looked like in 2025. In 2025, it was more finesse. It was more spread you out, is more how can I get the big plays? I think that in 2026, not only because you change systems, but also because you change quarterbacks, but I think it's primarily system.
Yeah.
This system is going to be much more, we're going to balance out running the football and passing the football. We're going to specifically focus on protecting the ball. And I know everyone wants to protect the ball, but we've been in this space long enough to see that not every offense is necessarily geared towards protecting it. Sometimes risks are part of certain offenses. And I think that was the case with Kendall Briles. I don't believe that that's the case when it comes to Gordon Samus. So we're going to see Jeremy Payne, who's the running back for TCU, get a much greater emphasis than Kavorian Barnes did when healthy last season. I think you're going to see Jaden Craig use his legs more as well. I don't know how much designed runs is going to be, but he's just an athletic guy. So I think you're going to see that contribute to the running game as well. And then you're going to see more safe decisions. There's a bigger promotion of that. And that's been the key all offseason, whether you talk about the change from Craig to Hoover, the change from Briles to Samus, or you just hear Sonny Dykes talk. It's all about how can we protect the ball? So I think that's going to be the biggest change, along with the pass to run ratio.
That's good to know. Yeah, one of the questions I was going to ask was the expected, run pass differences with the new offense, and that makes a lot of sense. And especially with Craig, a guy who I noticed in looking at his game splits later in the year, ran the ball a decent amount. Early in the year, wasn't running it a ton. So he ended the year with 48 carries. 20 of those came in the last 3 games. So it almost seemed like we got to keep him healthy. He's the franchise. But then when we're playing Penn, when we're playing Yale, our rival, and then in our first playoff game, we're really going to let him loose. So that it appears as though that's what happened last year. Not that what happened at Harvard will happen this year for him.
Yeah, and I hope that it doesn't. Honestly, Mike, I hope that when you see Craig week 1, he's running the football, because you obviously have to protect your quarterback, but you don't want to protect your quarterback to the point in which you're limiting him. And I compare it to Jaden Daniels from the Washington Commanders. A big part of his game is his ability to run the football. He can throw the ball with the best of them. Like, I don't want to get that misconstrued, but a big part of his ability to be a game changer is also what he does with his legs. And I know that he's coming off of an injury, but he's got to trust himself and trust his body, and the team has to trust that they can protect him in order to use his legs. When I'm talking about Jaden Craig, I understand you don't want to risk him, but the ability to be mobile at that position is simply just valuable enough to risk it, air quotes, risk it, but it's football. Everything's a risk. He's going to be able to make teams either have to keep eyes on him. In man coverage, it's going to be impossible. Everybody's back is turned. He can make you pay. He can turn 2nd and 10 into 3rd and 3. He can turn 3rd and 7 into 1st and 10. And I think that the ability to threaten a defense with your legs, you don't always have to execute. But once they know you can do it and they have to account for it, now somebody has to pay attention to the quarterback who maybe was an extra person in coverage. Maybe it's just an extra responsibility in front of them. You can sneak a slot receiver over the middle of the field right behind the linebacker, things like that. But once you create the threat, the impact almost does it without you even having to use it.
Yeah, and I think that definitely could open up spots for a slot receiver. Pimpton's been a solid tight end. I thought he might do a little more last year, just based on just looking at stats, volume. I thought coming over from LSU, he would be solid. I'm assuming he was hurt a good chunk of last year, looking at the numbers. Is that right, Darrion? Yeah,
he was, but also TCU had some good tight ends last year.
They did,
right?
Yeah.
So he was injured, but both Pimpton and Lafayette Kayue are guys who I expect to really produce. Kari Ashley came in as a tight end from Navarro College, but it sounds like he's being used more as a wide receiver, but he is lining up in line. But the way Sonny Dykes was talking about him earlier, he kind of got lumped in with the wide receivers. That could be something I just was misconstruing as lumping in with pass catchers, but it certainly sounded like that to me. He's not like Pimpton. He's not like Kaiue. These guys are 6'6", 250, 260. Yeah. Ashley's 210. 215, so when you look at what he's able to do, I think he has the ability to put Pimpton on the field, have him in line, but then you can have Ashley split out wide, or you can have in a red zone. I would probably say more so than just anywhere else on the field. You can have him in a slot as a big slot type of guy. That's a wild card. If there's somebody to pay attention to at the end of the year, it's Nakari Ashley, because I don't necessarily know if we have a defined role for what he'll be. So when he gets on the field, it'll be interesting to see just how he's used.
That is interesting. Yeah. When you have those guys who we don't quite know what box they're going to fit into. Will Jeremy Scott likely be the number one receiver, transfer from South Alabama?
No, I don't think so at all. I think the number one wide receiver is going to be Jordan Dwyer.
And I'm of the newer guys. I should.
The newer guy.
Yeah, I worded that right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll lump in the freshmen who are now sophomores with Scott, because he's the big addition. So I'll be interested to see what he does. Will he be the top of the people stepping up? That's a big question, because TCU stacked at wide receiver with potential. They're not stacked with a lot of experience. They're not stacked with a lot of production, but they are stacked with potential. A guy like Ed Small, who's been ripping it up in fall camp.
Yeah.
He had a really good freshman year, but it was derailed by injuries. A guy like Terry Shelton is a young player who didn't see the field a lot. And I lump both Terry Shelton and Dozie Azukama in the same boat, because they're two young players who didn't see the field a lot last year, but there's expectations on what they can be this year. And I think they're talented, man. I genuinely believe if the youth in TCU's wide receiver room is able to manifest itself and not even reach its ceiling. The youth in the room doesn't have to reach its ceiling. It just has to get maybe 3/4 of the way there, because they're still sophomores. So you're not expected to reach your ceiling as a sophomore. But if they can get 3/4 of the way there, this could be a deadly wide receiving core. I genuinely feel that, because they have high-end talent at the top when it comes to Jordan Dwyer. To me, Dwyer is a player who, stepping up from being arguably the best wide receiver 2 in the Big 12 to being a wide receiver 1, is the biggest story in the room. I believe in him. But underneath that, you have Ed Small, you have Terry Shelton, you have Dozie Azukama, and then you have Jeremy Scott, who's coming in from South Alabama. And then you also have Major Everhart, a guy in Dane Jones who didn't get a lot of headlines in spring. He's been showing up in fall camp. There's a lot of talent in this room, Mike, and I don't know if the key contributors week 1, 2, and 3 are guaranteed to be the key contributors in week 10, because it's such a deep room that it could be a week-by-week basis of who's going to be the most productive outside of probably Dwyer and Small. I think those two are going to be the consistent.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I saw in the depth chart, that I always look, I think listed Small as the starter, the slot receiver, and then Dwyer and Scott as the two outside guys.
Mm-hmm.
So O-line wise, Noah McKinney transferred in from Oklahoma State, and in following the portal, it seemed like that was a very early one. He went in the portal right away, committed almost right away. So clearly both those sides thought that was a good fit. And then the rest of the O-line are returners. Not that they all started last year, but they were guys who were on the roster last year, which in doing a lot of these previews, I've not seen that much. We've seen a ton of turnover with teams at the O-line. So other than McKinney, everybody coming back, what do you expect out of this trench play this year?
Most interesting position group on the team. Okay. Most interesting. I'm probably the most excited for wide receiver, but the most interesting one is offensive lineman, because it's a lot of returning. That's a big thing for Sonny Dykes.
Yeah.
Retain, and develop. That's what he's always preaching. So it makes sense that you have a majority returners. but I don't think it's not a lot of returning production. It's not a lot of returning starters.
Yeah.
So that's what's really interesting because, you're right. A lot of teams are going to bring in transfers. TCU is going to have one, maybe two starting transfers or starting players on our offensive line who transferred in. Jaheim Buchanan's currently in a battle with Cooper Powers. Powers was at TCU. Buchanan wasn't. He comes in from Florida International. We'll see what happens with that competition. If Powers ends up starting as center, you're right. It could be 4 returning players and 1 transfer guy. The thing is, Witten Van Hoy hasn't played much. There's a lot of belief in him, though, but he hasn't played much. You're looking at Killian Registe. Hasn't played much. A lot of belief in him, though. Ben Taylor Whitfield is the best offensive lineman they have. Scouts have been at practice looking for him consistently, evaluating him. He's going to be the leader in that room, of course. And then you have a guy in Cade Bennett who's also still competing with Ryan Hughes, who's been all around the offensive line. He played right tackle last year, or he played left tackle last year, excuse me. Then he got injured.
Yeah, the depth chart I have lists him as the right tackle backup to Van Hoy.
But he's one of those. He's the guy who he could be your left guard. He could be your right tackle. He could be your left tackle. If he ends up not starting, which we'll see, I think it probably is going to be that he doesn't start. He could easily be the swing lineman who, if anybody gets hurt, he goes in. Like every team needs that guy. If you have an offensive lineman who you trust to play tackle and guard, or even just to play both sides of the line of scrimmage at one position, right guard, left guard, or right tackle, left tackle, it allows you to have the depth and the calm that comes with that depth in case anybody gets injured.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that. That was, and you would kind of echo it too, but for me, I feel like I'm pretty good at staying on the pulse of, teams' position groups. Mm-hmm. This one, I didn't know much about the O-line. I was pretty much at your mercy of what you were going to tell me about these guys. Because like you said, they were here, but not a lot of returning production.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. It makes it really difficult to project what you're going to see. And that's why I think that first game versus North Carolina is important, because you see some teams who they don't ever play a P4 opponent until they get to conference play. Yeah. TCU, even if you don't feel a certain way about North Carolina, they could be one of the worst teams in the ACC again. It is a P4 competition game. And I think that's going to be important for players who either don't have a lot of experience, like the players we mentioned on the offensive line, or somebody like Jaden Craig, who's jumping up in subdivision. I don't care if it's the worst team in FBS. I don't care if it's a middle tier team. You wanted him to get those reps. You want them, all of them, to get those reps, to get a little bit of more familiarity, a little bit more foundation under their feet, as opposed to playing a bunch of FCS teams. And then you still have the shock when you get to conference play.
And it's a game on a different continent. The weather's good. It always rains at that game. The field is not meant for American football. There's a lot of weird variables in that game that could happen in week 0 that you just ideally you wouldn't have to deal with under normal circumstances. The defensive.
I agree. No, I agree. I agree.
Okay, yeah. Defensive side of the ball. So I think Andy Avalos is a pretty good D coordinator. He struggled as a head coach, but I think, when he was at Boise, of course, but as a D coordinator, he has had, he was at Boise before as D coordinator, at Oregon as D coordinator, then became Boise's head coach. Now with the Frogs, what are we seeing in his defenses? Nominally it's listed at a 4-2-5 mindset, mentality wise.
Yeah, I'm so interested in this defense as well, because the newness on the squad tends to get focused on Craig and Samus because it's offensive coordinator, quarterback, obviously, right? And Kendall Briles' departure was a huge story. Josh Hoover's departure, huge story.
It was.
The departure of Caleb Elarms-Orr and Nnamdi Obiazor wasn't really talked about a lot. These are great players. I thought they were fantastic. I saw Elarms-Orr making plays in Bills practice, covering James Cook. He is going to be a tough player to replace. But they do have Max Carroll. And Max Carroll is a player who I pushed to see get more time. in 2025. I thought he was fantastic in his limited snaps, but when you have two really good linebackers, I get everybody can't touch the field at all times.
Yeah.
Still, he was able to find himself in a role. I want to put this out here. Max Carroll was on a defense that ran two linebackers most of the time. Carroll's on a defense that ran two linebackers most times, and both of those linebackers were NFL draft picks this year, and he still found a way to push himself into a rotational role.
Yeah.
This is not a situation where maybe Alarm's aura was lacking or OBI's aura was lacking, but they were still starting caliber, and let's get the young guy in there to get him some reps. These are two really strong linebackers, and honestly, I wanted Carroll to get more time because he made the most of the time he was on the field. So all that to relate back to your question about Avalos, when you're looking at him, I think you're going to have to focus a lot on Carroll as his voice on the field. He's going to be the guy who relays everything that Avalos says. He's going to be the player who is making sure that the defensive line is lined up correctly. And you're going to get some pressure packages. You're going to get something. He's going to change up how it looks at times. But if you can focus on Carroll being the voice and doing it well, and then you can also focus on that front line continuing to improve and staying steady as a run defense, I think that if you do those two things, or if you get those two things, I should say, you could have a really solid defense. And they were a solid defense last year.
Okay. No, that's good to know. And yeah, Short was, the one who kind of popped on my radar transferring over from Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
The defensive line, Oyewale and Chapman, look to be those DN guys. What are we going to see? Get after the pass type guys, more well-rounded. What do we expect from them?
Oyewale is a well-rounded player. Okay. He's an extremely well-rounded player. I think he can get after the quarterback. We know he can stop the run. There's an argument that he'll be the best. There's a good argument he'll be top 3, top 4 best players on this defense next year. I really do trust him. The problem is I don't know how much of a pass rusher he's going to be. He definitely has to grow in that area. Chapman is raw. He's just like all the offensive linemen we just spoke about, where he's been around and we've seen him make his improvements. He's been a pretty good rusher, but we want to see him bring down the quarterback a little bit more. That's what he needs to do. Chapman's going to need, if he plays, I want to leave John Schobel some room to steal that starting position. They're going to rotate a lot, but John Schobel, Zach Chapman, Carter Buck, they're all going to be competing for what TCU calls their stud position, which is essentially another edge rusher, but it's the guy who focuses more on rushing the passer. That's the one you expect more. One of those three has to get it together because TCU as a team didn't have enough of a pass rush last year. I say that if they can focus on Carroll taking that step forward and that defensive line staying steady in the run game plus improving, that improvement is in the pass game. But you could be solid. They're not going to be a really good defense until they take care of the pass rush and the coverage.
Good to know. Yeah. Interior D-line wise, Deal and Din Mabua were the two that listed as starters on my end. And then Tristan Johnson was also a guy that mentioned as, guys who could be playing. It seems like we haven't seen a ton of football out of a few of these guys, but Ansel Dinambua did play quite a bit last year. It seems like. So. Yeah,
I think that interior defensive line is solid. I genuinely do. My favorite guy in that room is Ansel Demba. I think that his ability last year popped off the screen a lot. It didn't pop off the box score, I'll be honest with you, but it did pop off the screen. When watching it, I would often see him, and I feel like he made a lot of assist plays. I would have to go through and watch the games again more and more, but through my pure memory, which depending on who you ask, maybe the greatest thing in the world or it's lackluster. But off my memory and what I remember writing down, I remember talking about on the show throughout the year and just popping up in games, Demba is a very impactful and disruptive player. And at your interior defensive line, stats often aren't going to show.
No, you're right about that.
They're not going to show that. But when he was at Washington State, and Washington State absolutely dominated the Pac-12 that season. Demba had 6 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss. The ability to get production is there. I think that he is more disruptive than his first year at TCU stat sheet will show. And if he can match up the production on the eye test to the box score, he can have a season that looks more like his last year at Washington State, which once again, 6 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss.
Okay. Then we'll move to the defensive backs, or last position group. Now, Vernon Glover's a very good player, and he's back. I think he is probably the guy that most people will recognize here. At the other corner spot, is Jackson going to be the guy, or what are you hearing? Okay.
Yeah, it should be Gil Jackson. He was a spring camp superstar.
Okay.
He was the guy who probably raised his stock more than anybody else over the spring. And when you're 6'3", when you're about 200 pounds almost, you aren't supposed to move with the fluidity in your hips that Gil Jackson does. And that was something that everybody talked about. He's the high potential player of this defense. He's the player that if he reaches his ceiling, we're talking about all conference. And all due respect to Vernon Glover, he's the veteran. He's going to be the guy who is leaned on. But if Gil Jackson is able to reach his ceiling, then we're talking about, I gave the praise for Oyewale, but we're talking about maybe Jamel Johnson is the only player on this team that's better. And I don't say defense. I said on this team that's better than Gil Jackson. When you're just combining the way you're moving at that size, at that length, because 6'3" is really good height for a corner. Really good height. And if you can move, that means people aren't able to threaten you as far down the field. That means at the catch point, you have a little bit extra room if you need some catch-up speed, right? Because you have more length. Yeah. It means it's going to be harder to get over you. It's going to be hard in the red zone to post you up and get you with a fade. Like, the size, they say you can't teach size for a reason, and Gil Jackson is the example of why that phrase is a real thing.
That's good to know.
He just has to put it together. It's all potential. It's all practice. We need to see him do what he did in the spring, in the fall.
Good to know. Safety-wise, Jacob Fields comes over from Louisiana Tech, and will Jamel Johnson be the other safety most likely?
Yeah, 1,000%. He's the best player on this team, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah.
Go ahead. What was you going to say?
I was going to say, tell us why you think that. Yeah, what's so special about him?
5 interceptions last year. He's coming off the best year of his career. We know that he's a run stopper, right? Yeah. Like, we know that. He's not
I saw he had 60 tackles last year, which was very impressive. Yeah.
And he was doing that the year prior. And then obviously he got a bigger role. He increased his tackling, but he was a sure tackler last year. He barely missed the tackle. I think he had a less than 3% missed tackle rate, I believe, per PFF. I don't know the exact number, but I do know when I looked at it, my eyes said, yeah, that sounds about right. We want advanced stats to match what we feel like we see, right? And we saw a player last year who didn't miss many tackles, but he added the ability to take the ball away. And it wasn't just a bunch of tip drills he's around, which is still valuable. Still shows the ability to be in position. But it was breaking on the football. It was closing. And I want to see him get his hand on the ball a little bit more, because it was primarily just interceptions for him. And look at me complaining about $1 million, right? Like, who's going to complain about a gift? Yeah. But you want to see him get his hand on the ball a little bit more, even if it doesn't result in turnovers every time. You just want to see him be a consistent presence in the pass game. But he showed the ability to be impactful, take the ball away, be a quality player, both in run and pass coverage, and everything's changing around him. So, it's not that it's a mixture of the team is a little bit more depleted with known commodities, but also he was really good last year. He is the reason that he could come in and be a finalist for one of the better defensive backs in the career in the country in 2026. I just think Johnson is really good, but Fields is a player, because I don't want to give all the shine to Johnson and forget who's next to him. Fields is a player who you mentioned earlier. He's in a competition battle as well, but I'm a Fields guy because I like players who can take the ball away, and that's what he did. And not only did he take the ball away at La Tech, he also got the ball in his hands and turned it to an offensive player and said, let's go score. Let's go score. And that's my type of defensive back. I came up where we were watching Ed Reed. Ed Reed got the ball and he tried to go score. Is Justin Fields, not Justin Fields, Jacob Fields, Ed Reed? No, he is not Ed Reed. But the point is, the mentality is when the ball gets in my hand, got to go score. I grew up on Ed Reed. I grew up on Tyrann Mathieu. These are players who, when they got the football, they were no longer defensive backs. They were wide receivers and running backs. And I think that Jacob Fields has that mentality of, once it's my ball, I'm no longer a defender. And I love that about Fields.
He had 3 interceptions last year, returned 2 of them for touchdowns. So, and to go along with that, had 50 solo tackles, 42 assisted tackles. So very much a player in both aspects, run and pass. So always top notch to see in safeties. Now, as we're winding down here, I always kind of end this segment with, conference wide, Big 12 wide. Where do you expect TCU to be record-wise?
I say, I did a segment on this just the other day, funny enough. I say 8.5 is a solid bar, right? Like, I think 8 to 9 wins is really good for you this year. Everybody is looking for 10, right? So right now they have them at 6-3 in
this is just conference play. Yeah.
If TCU goes 6-3 in conference play, it's a good year.
Yes.
I want to be, I don't want to have this mistaken at all. I know everybody has their eyes on 10 wins. I respect it. I get it. I'm just not of the belief that this is a 10-win team at the moment. Not with the schedule they have. They have to play BYU, they have to play Texas Tech, they have to play Utah, and they have to play Arizona. And those are probably the 4 best teams in the conference.
You have BYU early, and then that last month of the year, Arizona, K-State, Utah, Texas Tech. That last month of the year is tough.
Brutal. And Kansas State's not going to be a pushover either,
no,
right?
Not at all.
Like Kansas State's going to be a wild card, could easily be a game you lose. And
Avery Johnson's going to be good. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think Utah is a game you could actually get. But the point is, if you have 4 of the best teams on your conference on your schedule and you're 6-3, that's pretty good. That's solid. And you look at the way it's laid out for everyone who's looking on video, 6-3 is technically 7th place on this, but it's also 5th place, right? Like it's also 5th place. It's also Kansas State being predicted to be the best team in the conference. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to get 3-8-1s.
Yeah, and I think Oklahoma State will improve. I don't think they're a 6-3 conference team this year.
So, you look at these things, but 7th is, and when looking at standings, there's a couple of ways to look at it. You can look at the record, you can look at the standings. When there's a log jam of, 4, I believe, 6-3 teams, that tells you you're about 5th to, 4 of them, teams. You're in decent shape. You're in decent shape, and you probably get to November being a competitive team in the Big 12, which is the end goal at the end of the day. At the end of the day, if TCU goes in November and they're not competitive, seeing that their toughest games are in November, it was an ugly year.
Yeah. So if you're going to have to make a prediction today, what 2 teams do you think will play for the Big 12 title?
I'm a safe guy, man. I'm not a very risky
guy.
So I'm going to go ahead and go with the same guys from last year. I'm going to go with Tech, and I'm going to go with BYU. And BYU has quietly been the best team in the conference. They just never been the best team in the conference. On a consistent basis, there's nobody who's been more consistent than them.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you with those 2. It's tough not to. Yeah. I always ask, what coach in the conference is on the hottest seat?
Dion. It's Dion.
For me, it's him. Dave Aranda might be.
It might be Dave Aranda. Yeah. Actually, that's a good one. It's between those 2.
Yeah.
It's Aranda.
Okay.
I may have to go with Aranda. Ask me tomorrow, I might say Prime again. But Aranda, people are, I'm going to tell you right now, people in Waco are shocked that Aranda has a job today.
Yes.
So yeah, it has to be, because he's probably at the biggest risk of losing his job mid-year. Even if Prime struggles this year, I don't know if he gets fired mid-season.
I don't think
Aranda
so.
could.
No, I don't. I think you're right. Yeah. Another one I always ask: what coach in the conference do you think is most likely to vault himself to a blue blood or a really good job?
Sataki.
Okay.
I mean, he just positioned himself for more money at BYU, and I think he wants to be there. But
I've said, I wonder for him being an alumni, what it would take for him to leave. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Dillingham's the same boat, though. You wonder what it would take for him to leave. Yeah.
So I will go Sataki.
Okay.
Probably go Dillingham. Though
I like Sataki's a good one.
I think that Dillingham, I'll be really interested because he just lost Levitt and he lost Tyson. So if he comes out in Arizona State, and Arizona State was better than record suggested last year, by the way. But if they come out and they're really good again, if they come out and they're one of the best in the Big 12, a big bag might be calling, and a big bag might be all that's necessary in order to get them out of Arizona State.
Yeah. No, I think both good ones. And now I've always asked kind of an oddball question to my recent guests. If, say, when we get off of this call, if you find out Sonny Dykes is no longer TCU's head coach, who do you want to hire tomorrow to be their next head coach?
Oh, he caught me off guard with that one. I've never thought of
that. There's a lot going into this one. Like a realistic guy that you would hire as the next one.
Right now, that's tough. You know, what I would do right now is I would make Gordon Samus the interim head coach. That is genuinely what I would do. I've heard everything he's doing as far as discipline. I think it's great. And then what I would do is I'd probably sit for a year, see what Samus does, and then I would do the Oklahoma State route where I go get the hottest G6 coach in the game. That's right. Like I can't think of anybody off the top of my head because I feel like all the hot ones got snatched up. Tulane got snatched up.
Charles Huff maybe will be. I think he'll be all right at Memphis.
No, shout out Charles Huff.
Matt Entz at Fresno, good coach. Jason Eck at New Mexico is another good one.
Yeah, so I would sit back and I would really evaluate for a year and then go grab the hottest coach on the G6 level or the hottest offensive mind that's out or something like that on the P4 level. But I would give Samus a year to run the ship.
Okay, no problem with that. I think that's continuity and that never a bad move. But we've reached the end of our time here, and I want to thank you for being here, Darrion. It was great to talk about TCU football and the Frogs. An episode I wanted to do for a while and a team I wanted to learn more about. Again, everybody, you can find him at Locked On Horned Frogs. I'll, of course, link all of these when we share this. And thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.